To many, The Last of Us wasn't just a game, it was a story that transcended its medium. So I started writing about The Last of Us yesterday to kill time, and then started really getting into it. Long story short, about 4 hours later I had ended up with a university dissertation and an urge to not let this file just sit on my desktop, never to be read by anyone. Then I saw how much I wrote and realised that nobody wants to sit and read all this. So here we are. About 20 minutes ago, I decided to start making this. With The Last of Us Part 2 just around the corner, what better time to look at the first game and appreciate it for what it was. Here's my analysis and love letter to The Last of Us. By all accounts, The Last of Us should be a depressing, sad and unenjoyable experience. You take control of Joel, a man who's lost his daughter at the start of the outbreak and found himself with nothing to live for, until he meets Ellie, a hard-shelled teen with trust issues and an immunity to the cordyceps virus. The world is a horrible place in this game, with hope and light being really hard to come by. This dystopian story should not make for a captivating and entertaining experience, especially for someone like me who only ever really likes happy endings and not pitch-black tones. And yet, through all this, The Last of Us is my favourite story ever told, and I loved every moment I had with the game. I only played the game for the first time in 2016, 3 years after it came out, and it was only because I got a copy of it with the PlayStation I'd been gifted that Christmas. I'd heard of it before, but never really had any interest, and eventually played it out of boredom on one dull night. 2 days later, once I finished it, my perspective on video game storytelling had been shifted completely. I thought video games did a good job of putting together a decent enough story every once in a while, but they were never that amazing, and they only ever felt there to sort of pad up the multiplayer and give customers more for their money. That was until this. With this game, Naughty Dog proved that not only can video games tell a beautiful emotional story, but they can be better than movies and TV shows than captivating you in a story. The interactivity of video games really lets you be involved in a story in ways that no movies or TV shows can do. Now, talk to anyone I know and they'll probably be able to tell you that they've been bored to death by a story or conversation about The Last of Us from me in the past. I mean, I could talk for hours about it. And I'm sure it's all gonna happen again next week when the sequel comes out. Just saying that gets me giddy. So, to start this off, let's go through and have a quick recap of the key points of the story of The Last of Us. Feel free to skip ahead to the timestamp on screen if you know the story and don't want to hear my beautiful voice recapping it. But why would you want to skip that? The story of this game is not a happy one. By logic, you should not enjoy your time experiencing it, but that logic just doesn't apply here. We start the game on the night the world ends. Joel and his daughter Sarah are safe at home, unknown to them that it will be the last time they experience such a blessing. The cordyceps virus breaks out, and within a few hours the world has collapsed. Joel tries to escape the city with his daughter and his brother Tommy. They get close, but a military officer is ordered to kill them, and hesitantly he follows his orders. They manage to avoid death thanks to Tommy, only to find Sarah had caught one of the bullets and she slowly dies in her father's arms.
Don't do this to me, babe. Don't do this to me, babe. Come on. No. 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 Please.
This, inarguably, is one of the most impactful, tense, and heartbreaking openings to any piece of entertainment. The tone has been set. This is not a game you are going to play to smile and think happy thoughts. Skipping ahead 20 years, we find Joel still living, but far less alive. It's clear from the start that we're controlling a man with very little left to live for. Joel's become a smuggler, among other things, during the large time gap that we jumped over. Video game legend Troy Baker, who is the actor playing Joel, said that his main note for playing Joel was that he was a man with very few moral lines left to cross, which became the anchor point of the character for Troy. Heading towards our latest job, we're shown glimpses of Boston in a new, unfamiliar world. The world controlled by military forces, and it's clear to see that it's a hopeless living. Around the world, we see scattered messages of words like, "Look for the light," "Seek the fire," "We will take it all back," and similar messages written on various buildings and back alleys. These are the words of the Fireflies, one of the last sources of light in this dark world.
Look, let's just go find a firefly.
We won't have to look very far.
The Fireflies are a rebellion group that are fighting to return civilization to what it once was and get rid of the military control covering the world. To the military and some of the public, they're a terrorist organization that should be stopped at all costs. You can sometimes see Fireflies who've been publicly executed on the streets, and their bodies are left on display to send a message to those who want to follow the Fireflies.
Damn it, they got Warren. Goodbye, friend.
We should go, Marlene.
Moving on, we're tasked with smuggling a girl across the country to the Fireflies' headquarters. The girl, Ellie, is revealed to be immune to the cordyceps virus.
Look at this.
I don't care how you got infected.
It's 3 weeks old.
No, everyone turns within 2 days, so you stop bullshitting.
It's 3 weeks. I swear.
Joel and Ellie do not get along, and it's clear that Joel does not want to return to being a father after the tragedy of his own daughter's death. Ellie is not interested in becoming attached to Joel either. I could write for hours about the journey they undertake in the mission to get Ellie across the country to help develop a cure, but for the sake of the viewers, I will continue. I would absolutely recommend going no further until you have witnessed the story in its entirety, as no video or writing can make it truly as impactful as the game. I mean, hell, if you came this far into the video without actually experiencing the story first, you're a bit of a fucking idiot. So, after hundreds of miles of travelling, countless infected and hunters and soldiers killed, several detours and reroutes, months of bonding, serious trauma and injury, and unforgettable losses, the pair finally arrive at the Firefly headquarters in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's been a hell of a journey, but now it's over, so it seems. They arrive at the HQ only to be separated. Ellie is prepped for surgery while Joel is stopped for a talk in which it is revealed that in order to develop a cure, Ellie will have to be sacrificed so that they can retrieve what they need from her brain.
Find someone else.
There is no one else.
Listen, you were gonna show me where.
Stop. I get it. But whatever it is you think you're going through right now is nothing to what I have been through.
They try very unsuccessfully to remove Joel from the hospital, but he's come to love Ellie too much in the time they've spent together to let her die. He'd lost a daughter before and just couldn't let it happen again. He brutally charges his way through the hospital, killing all Fireflies that get in his way, and he escapes with Ellie. During this section, there is a clear desperation in Joel that had not yet been seen to quite an extent. The ruthlessness of his actions and lack of care about the consequence are shocking to the player, but almost understandable. You could see a heartless murderer in Joel, but what's more clear to see is a father who can't lose another child. When Ellie regains consciousness, she and Joel are on her way out of the city. Joel makes the decision to lie to Ellie, telling her that she was actually one of dozens of people immune to the infection, and that there was no longer an active search for a cure. They head back to Jackson, where Joel's brother is part of a community that has regained some sense of civilization and have built a town. Ellie, however, demands that Joel swears that he didn't lie about the Fireflies and what happened to the hospital. Him swearing it to be true gives Ellie a silent decision to make. It is made clear in her eyes alone that she knows he's lying, and her trust in Joel becomes damaged. And the credits roll.
Okay.
The track The Path, A New Beginning from the soundtrack starts playing, and most players are lost. It really didn't feel like it was going to end at that cutscene. To me, the story is so beautiful because, among many reasons, you don't actually feel good after finishing it. What I've realized in recent years is that a good, impactful story has you asking questions and doubting your thoughts for long after the credits. This game makes you think about the lengths you would go to for someone you love, and if someone like Joel is a bad person, or if he just made mistakes. Creative director Neil Druckmann stated that the original working title for this game was Mankind, and it's clear to see why. It is a game that makes us question human nature and what makes a good or bad person. We will surely see the repercussions of Joel's actions and how Ellie deals with the situation in The Last of Us Part 2, which is so close you can taste it. So I'm going to go completely off script, straight off the tongue for a couple of minutes. This story, to me, if you asked me why I really like this story, it'd be hard to give you a straight answer. Because if you look at it from the outside, it's just a dark, depressing story. This father loses his kid and then lives in depression and a pointless existence for 20 years, and then finds this, gets saddled with this new kid that does nothing but remind him of the life that he lost. And then through months and months of bonding with this girl, he finally cracks and allows himself to feel the love again. And at the end of that game, he's told he has to lose that love again. And it really makes me think of, is he a bad person for doing that? Because I think pretty much any human would do anything in that situation to save the one that they love. And it's a real thing that makes you think about humanity and mankind, as Neil said it was going to be called. And it makes you think that Joel, from an outside view, could be seen as an arsehole, and he doomed the world. You can't be a good person and doom the world. And you may not respect his actions or like what he did, but it's hard to not understand why he did it. We'll come back to this later when we talk about the ending and what comes next for Joel and Ellie. I could talk for hours about just this ending alone, and we haven't even touched the surface. We haven't mentioned Henry and Sam, or Tess, or David, and how important they are to the story, because they are truly amazing parts of the game. But for now, we're going to move on to the world of The Last of Us. As mentioned earlier, the world of The Last of Us is so incredibly well designed that everywhere you can go, you can see and feel the darkness and hopelessness. There is some air of a world that used to be, like finding old houses with family memories or teenage diaries, which you are often quickly snapped out of by surrounding infected and hunters. You first see this dystopian future in Boston, and everywhere you look you see armed soldiers, desperate civilians, and shady survivors. As you move around this world, you start to think of your own town or neighborhood looking the way this does, locked in by fencing, governed by soldiers and a curfew. Or at least I did. Michael Noland, lead character artist, is actually the one responsible for setting the look of the infected. It was the original idea of the writers to have the cordyceps virus jump to humans, which is what would cause infection in this game, but they went through a lot of designs to decide how that would actually look. When Michael one day put some images together of fungus growing on the human body, the idea was set that this is how they would look. The infected, especially clickers and bloaters, are covered in these mushroom-like fungi that have grown all over them since they were infected and actually split and broken parts of the body. You also see these fungus around the world which give off infectious spores that can make anyone who breathes them infected. These growths are actually the final stage of infection, where a bloater will go into a dark corner and their body will decay and almost melt into the environment. I didn't actually know this until a few playthroughs in, but it made subsequent travels in this world more eye-catching. A beautiful part of this world is the detail and consideration put into every part of every level. When I think apocalyptic world, I pretty much think of grass and vines everywhere and rusty metal. Naughty Dog went far further than this and made a truly real abandoned world. I didn't know until I watched Grounded, which is the documentary of the development of The Last of Us, but it turns out that if big cities like New York were to be left without any maintenance and upkeep work, it will be flooded in no more than 2 days. Neil Druckmann mentions using a book called The World Without Us, which describes in detail what the world would look like if humans went away. Nature is already so desperately trying to fight back against us, and we are so desperately trying to keep nature at bay. If the fight stopped, Mother Nature would take back her world a lot faster than you might think. However, the idea of nature taking over isn't always so dark and terrifying. One of the most impactful, iconic, beautiful, and memorable moments of the game comes from just before Joel and Ellie reach the Fireflies HQ in Salt Lake City, and they encounter a herd of giraffe roaming the city. The pure wonder, joy, and excitement from Ellie is a big reminder that despite all she's done and all she's been through in the last few months we've been with her, there is still this childlike innocence left inside her. It's a reminder of purity in this broken world, and it makes it all the harder to hear that she would have to die to save it. You can stand on that roof for as long as you like and soak in that rare moment of peace and beauty before going back down into the real world. I personally stood there for at least a full minute on my first run through, just thinking about what we had been through on this journey. You could feel that the journey was drawing to a close, and I wanted to think about how Ellie had changed from when we first met her in Boston. This scene is only made stronger by Vanishing Grace, a beautiful track from the incredible soundtrack of the game by Gustavo Santaolalla. There are also moments such as traversing the rooftops en route to the Capitol building, where even the characters themselves have to stop and acknowledge the beauty of this world. Even though it's not a great place to be, it's hard not to appreciate the gorgeousness of it sometimes. The giraffe scene on the roof resonated with a lot of people and became an iconic image of The Last of Us. In a video playthrough of the game with himself and Nolan North for Retro Replay, Joel's actor Troy Baker tells the story of a fan and a father who played the beginning of the game up until Sarah's death and couldn't bear to go any further. The game collected dust on this father's shelf for a few months before he finally decided to finish it, and he says that once he got to this scene, he felt the relief, and he said to Troy, "I guess sometimes you gotta push through and do the hard things so that you can find your giraffe moment." Music has become more and more of a vital part of visual storytelling, and something like a video game definitely needs a soundtrack in order to add to the emotion and intensity, as well as give an air of calmness and innocence during times where danger isn't imminent. In a world like that of The Last of Us, there are so very few moments where you aren't in immediate danger, and so many moments where emotion and tension are added to phenomenally by the soundtrack. The work of Gustavo Santaolalla for this game is, in my opinion, some of the best for any video game, movie or TV show ever created. I have such love for this soundtrack and appreciate it greatly. Tracks like All Gone, Aftermath, which is played during Sarah's final moments, are so beautifully tragic that they could get you emotional on their own. All Gone is one of a few recurring tracks in this game, with multiple versions that each have their own part to play and convey different feelings along the story. Naughty Dog never fail when it comes to scoring their games, but this has to be their best work in terms of music. Every track makes you feel something, some very much more than others. A personal favourite of mine is The Choice, which you hear after a very powerful conversation with Ellie, in which both the love and anger in both characters is so clear to see. After this certain conversation, which we'll come to at another time, Joel realizes that he has a choice to make, and spends a long ride thinking about it. And without saying a word, you know what he's thinking, and you know how he made his decision based purely on body language, motion capture, and music. There is a floatiness to a lot of the tracks in this game that bring about a feeling of uneasiness and worry, even during the calmer segments of the game. This only continues to add on to the feeling that you are never safe in this cold world, and you always have to be looking out for yourself and the ones you love. Something that this game does fantastically well is giving you huge amounts of background and emotion, often without saying a single word. A lot of this is down to the fantastic motion capture and facial animations, while another huge part of this comes down to music. The soundtrack has the fantastic mark of being able to carry emotion where words fail. Going back to the giraffe scene, the track Vanishing Grace Childhood portrays a stunning feeling of innocence and beauty in an otherwise terrifying place. The track is quickly followed up by Vanishing Grace, the original version of the track, which, while still full of light and kindness, starts to represent more of a subtle sadness that plunges into a more uneasy melody, signifying the loss of innocence in a way that you could just never do with dialogue. This, paired with the symbolism of the giraffe herd moving out of view, is some of the best visual storytelling in video games. The composition for this game was done in a way that you don't think about or see all too often. It wasn't composed to picture, but rather composed during the development and writing of the game. This enabled some amazing inspiration as the music began to inspire themes of the story, and the story in turn started to affect the music. It created this amazing cycle of inspiration that resulted in something powerful. Gustavo mentions in the Grounded documentary that he got very experimental with this soundtrack, playing instruments he didn't know how to, recording in places like the bathroom or kitchen, and going outside of melody. It's strange to think of a soundtrack that doesn't actually always follow a melody and sounds wrong, but this was done very much on purpose for the game. It's a world that's no longer fair or kind, and order has been torn apart, so a good bit of this soundtrack reflects the dissonance of society with a dissonance of its own. This is a game with what I call reactive music, or evolving music. As mentioned earlier, some of the tracks have multiple versions of themselves. Take Vanishing Grace for example. There's the original as well as Innocence and Childhood. The theme itself, The Last of Us, has 5 different versions. Each is heard through the game and conveys different emotions for different circumstances as you proceed through the story. Some versions are exciting, some heartbreaking, and some mysterious. They all have their part to play, and the amount of different things done with some of these tracks is phenomenal. They are still the same tracks with the same fundamental message, yet have completely different feelings and tones. This soundtrack will forever hold a special place for me as one that provoked so much emotion and really fueled my love for music, especially in video games, and appreciation of the power of a soundtrack. Gustavo, you're a magician.
Maria told me about Sarah.
Ellie!
And
You are treading on some mighty thin ice here.
I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel, but I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you. So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared.
The Last of Us was one of the earlier games to use motion capture to such an extent. All cutscenes and all actors were recorded and all their movements translated and added to the game. Each scene is performed beautifully by the wonderful cast, including Ashley Johnson as Ellie, Troy Baker as Joel, Jeffrey Pierce as Tommy, Merle Dandridge as Marlene, and several more that I only wish that we had the time to discuss. Thanks to this use of mocap and the ability to catch every little detail and movement, this game does something that very few others have accomplished in being able to express such emotion even with the absence of speech. In my eyes, video games are treated unfairly in the public eye nowadays in terms of potential for storytelling. For people who haven't actually experienced stories in video games, they're almost definitely going to be skeptical about their ability to convey emotion and carry a story. From the times I've asked around, it's clear that a lot of the older generations generally can't see video games as a storytelling medium and think nothing more of them than time-killing pieces and influential shooters. Unfortunately, this is far from the truth. The Last of Us is a perfect example of how video games have evolved now to the point where they are just as good and sometimes better than movies and TV shows for connecting people to a story and making it powerful. A lot of the cutscenes in this game are real representations of the power of video games, and I'm going to focus on one in particular for a short while, the iconic ranch house argument.
Is this really all they had to worry about? Boys, movies, deciding which shirt goes with which skirt.
Right after a conversation at Tommy's dam where Ellie hears Joel talking about leaving her in Tommy's care and parting ways with her, Ellie acts out, steals a horse and rides out to an old farmhouse, where she sits upstairs reading a diary belonging to a pre-outbreak, presumably teen girl, and sees how little and unimportant the worries of this teen girl in our modern age were. Within the first few seconds of this cutscene, you're already made to think about how petty and unimportant your own problems are in day-to-day life. The scene moves on and Ellie opens up about how she feels about Joel being willing to abandon her. Ellie feels betrayed and scared. She tells Joel about how everyone she ever cares for dies or abandons her. Both Joel and Ellie in this scene are full of anger, love, and resentment. The excellent work of Ashley Johnson makes this scene one of the most iconic in video game storytelling.
I can't get infected! I can take care of myself!
How many close calls have we had?
Well, we seem to be doing all right so far.
And now you'll be doing even better with Tommy!
Some of the best work in these scenes comes from the improvisation by the actors. It was Ashley's idea to have Ellie push Joel in anger at the height of the argument, and it makes the scene so real and emotional.
Everyone fucking except for you!
It becomes clear here that Ellie has taken a liking to Joel and it would hurt her to lose him. Joel, on the other hand, is still trying to keep his feelings at bay. Only until right after this scene, where Joel takes his long ride back to Tommy's to think about his future with Ellie, in which he decides to keep his journey going with her. His hard shell has been pierced. He's allowed himself to love. All of Joel's thinking is done without a word of dialogue, yet you see every thought in his mind and how he comes to make his decision on this animation. Naughty Dog truly hold a crown for visual emotion in video games. A subtle motion that happens a few times in this game you could very easily miss is Joel's watch. He's given the watch by his daughter in the first scene in the game on the night she dies. He keeps this watch with him for the 20 years of his life that we didn't see, despite it being broken. This watch is Joel's way of remembering his daughter, and that you keep finding something to fight for. There were no doubt many moments in Joel's life post-outbreak where he just wanted to be with his daughter and could have given up his life in order to do that, but by assumption he'd feel as though he'd be letting down Sarah in doing that. It's a strange concept even to the actors to have video games show such great acting. Even cast member W. Earl Brown, who plays Bill, said it was a strange experience, saying, "Doing this was a whole lot like being 5, playing in the backyard with a stick like it's a machine gun."
I'm doing the exact same shit that I did 45 years ago. I just get paid for it now.
This game was released 7 years ago, and its acting and motion capture work holds up to any game released today. Still, even with 2013 technology, they did a great job at showing humanity in these characters. When Sam, played by Naji Jeter, talks with Ellie in a seemingly safe place about the nature of the infected, he asks, what if there's a person still inside?
What if they're trapped in there without any control of their body?
It's shortly revealed that he asked this question out of fear when he reveals a bite on his leg. He also asks Ellie about what she's afraid of, to which she initially tries to give a false answer but opens up about how she's afraid of ending up alone again.
Being by myself. I'm scared of ending up alone.
This is made all the more emotional when she later hears Joel planning to put her under Tommy's care and leave her. Yet another cutscene that makes you horrified, asks you questions, and changes your perspective on the characters.
If he doesn't know about it, you can't take it away. All right, I'm pooped. I'll see you tomorrow.
This is another topic I could talk frame for frame about through the whole game, but I've only got a few days left to finish this project, so let's move on to gameplay. It's easy to think of The Last of Us as an interactive movie that you just press some buttons on to keep the story rolling, but there is a fantastic, entertaining video game here. Everything from the movement to the user interface to the combat feels perfectly polished and joyous to play. As soon as you get your gear in Boston, you know things like ammunition and supplies are scarce and hard to come by. Looking at another Naughty Dog game, Uncharted, you would see machine guns everywhere you look and more ammo than you could possibly carry. That is not the case here. You have to be very careful with your ammo or you'll find yourself up against packs of infected and hunters with a couple of bullets and no way around them. They really did a great job of making you feel the desperation that these characters would feel. They also put effort into making the user interface as simple as possible, which is really helpful for the player as, in the words of The Last of Us UI designer Alexandria Neonakis, no one wants to spend time in menus. Nobody likes UI. They've made it as easy as possible to do things like choose between your weapons, craft medkits and shivs, and upgrade your weaponry while being minimally removed from the moment and immersion. They aimed for a UI with absolutely minimal button presses, and they did a great job of doing so. Another thing that the gameplay succeeded in doing was being able to carry the story, emotion, and theme through the game even outside of cutscenes. There's a moment near the beginning of the game where you're traveling through Boston and come across a man who has been infected by inhaling spores through a broken gas mask and pinned in place by debris. You have very few bullets, but the man asks you to end his suffering so that he doesn't turn into an infected. You have a moral choice in this game that makes no impact to the overall story, but makes you as a player decide whether to hold onto your bullet that could come in very useful later, or use it to give this stranger peace.
Poor bastard.
There are also more subtle hints of storytelling during gameplay in the form of Ellie and Joel's relationship and how it improves over time. Once you start playing while Ellie is with you, she's fairly distant, doesn't talk a whole lot, and clearly doesn't like being with Joel. Same with Joel, he wants nothing to do with this girl. She's just a smuggling job to him. However, by the time you reach, say, Tommy's Dam, she's more open, talkative, and willing to do things like help Joel with ladders or stand on platforms in the water while Joel takes her to the other side.
Teamwork.
The Last of Us is also a genuinely fun game to play for things like its combat. Of course, the fights in this game are not toned down. There is a lot of brutality, desperation, and rage in the way Joel fights. If you get into a close quarters fight with someone, you will see the aggression in Joel and feel every hit that he lands. The fighting really tells the story of what people, especially Joel, had to go through to survive so long in this world. One piece of gameplay always stands out to me when playing through The Last of Us, which is the winter level after Ellie escapes from her capture. She has to escape the town with nothing but her unbreakable determination and iconic switchblade. You're put in the shoes of someone in a terrifying situation where any mistake means death, or worse. You then get trapped in a burning restaurant with David, a near-psychotic character who wanted Ellie to abandon Joel and join his community. You have to hit David from behind a few times while he chases you with a gun and machete, and you feel scared. You as Ellie are on your own against a far more experienced survivor who has more than enough power to kill you. As a player, you have to fight this man with nothing but a knife. It is edge of your seat gameplay. You win the fight, and Ellie brutally hacks at David with his own machete in a burst of rage, fear, anger, and terror. You're snapped out of the moment by Joel, and you sit in the moment where you know Ellie has been scarred and she's lost most of her innocence. This isn't an event that's just forgotten about 5 minutes later either. As soon as you get it back into the game, it's clear as day that Ellie has become distant, vacant, and lost. More than a few times you try to talk to her and she just doesn't register you talking, or you ask her to help with something but she's just too deep in her own thought. This is followed by the beautiful chase of the giraffe, where Ellie's last piece of innocence is shown fading away. We really try not to have heroes and villains. It's all about perspective. The ending of The Last of Us is a divisive one that not many people were totally happy with. That's not to say it wasn't a good ending, but players weren't expecting it to end where it did, with Joel lying to Ellie's face and her making a quiet decision about their future. If you look at YouTubers playing this ending, most of them will have a lost, unhappy face as the credits start to roll. However, I believe this ending encapsulates just what the game has all been about. How far will you go for the ones you love, and what makes you a good or bad person? If you only saw the game from, say, the hospital scene onwards, you would think that Joel is nothing but a selfish asshole who doomed the world to never heal. But we didn't start at the hospital. We've spent a long time getting to know these characters, where they've come from and what they've done. You also have to think about what Joel's seen. From his perspective, the human race might not be worth saving. His daughter, Sarah, was killed by a soldier. Not an infected, not a hunter, an order-following soldier. Is that a world worth saving at the cost of a child? The journey ends on that hill overlooking Jackson as the pair get ready to settle into a calmer life, and, as Ellie iconically said, it can't be for nothing. Well, for Ellie, it was no doubt a disappointment to go all that way just to find out she wasn't quite as important as once thought, and it hadn't quite been for as much as she thought. But for Joel, however, it definitely wasn't for nothing. Not only did he get to be a father again, he got to be alive again. He found something to fight for. This ending makes you think about Joel's decision, and should you support the actions of this man that we've been controlling through the game? One of the last thoughts of many people when finishing this game was, is the human race worth saving at the cost of a little girl? Joel will surely face the fallout and consequence of his actions when the sequel drops on June 19th, and we are sure to see how Ellie deals with the fact that she can't even trust Joel anymore.
Swear to me. Swear to me that everything that you've said about the Fireflies is true.
I swear.
Okay.
Thank you, Naughty Dog, from the bottom of my heart. You've created something that'll stick with me for the rest of my life. Your game has touched deep in the hearts of millions, and we can only look forward to more. Every single one of you should be proud of what you've done. Endure and survive.